Pretty sure this is the same setup as the Austin Powers video I did last year. You know, you got the Gremlins jumper, that's the same, this is the same one. Got the tree, you've got the shed, the light box isn't there. Well, you can't have everything, can you? Hello everyone, Clack the Geek, and welcome back to what could potentially be the concluding part of my Inside No.9 Retrospective reviews, where we're going to be taking a look at Series 5, released in everyone's favourite year, 2020. It's hit the B-square! Now, before we get properly started with the review, I want to address that potentially being the end. Now, as you know, once this video is done, I will have reviewed all of Inside No.9 in some capacity. I've done retrospectives on the first 5 series, and then Series 6 and 7, I did contemporary reviews for them when they were broadcast. Now, for Series 7, it's still too fresh for me to update that. But Series 6, I think... I'm going to rewatch Series 6 soon. And if my opinions have changed enough, then I will do an updated retrospective review of that series. If it's not changed enough, if my opinions are still too similar to my old review, you're not getting another one, and this is where the series ends. But, you know, we've still got more number 9 to look forward to. I mean, as I'm recording this in about a week's time, we're getting the Bones of St. Nicholas Christmas special. I mean, that's exciting. Anyway, for Series 5, I need to give a bit of context. So, when this series was broadcasting, it was the first time that I really was aware of number 9. I did see trailers for this series. I was aware of what number 9 was. Not entirely, I just knew it was a TV show on the BBC. Obviously, I wasn't ready to watch it yet, but as I say, I was aware of what it was, and I do remember it being on this series specifically. I have very vivid memories, because it was February and March of 2020, and obviously that was like Doctor Who Series 12, and I do have kind of vivid memories of that time, because it was pre-corona, all that stuff. Now, I got into number 9 about 6 months after this series had concluded, so it was still, for me, it was, for the longest time, it was the current series of the show. It was the latest thing. It was the newest number 9 that we had. And there was that, and it sort of felt like I couldn't fully form my opinions because not enough time had passed for it to settle properly, if that makes sense. And another thing as well, this is so weird that I remember this. I remember this really vividly. It was in December of 2020. It was a miserable, cold Saturday night in December, and I was waiting for a Chinese for about 3 hours. What did I do for that time? Binge this entire season. I've never done that with number 9 before because it's self-contained stories, but I binged this entire series, and I think the thing is, Series 5 has always been a weird one for me because I've never been able to fully form an opinion on it, and I think it's because of these factors, the way I came about them, the way I watched them. You know, binging them all sort of made it blur into one in a way, but that's why I like coming back to this now, because I can form my proper opinion on it, and my opinion of it is that it's a fantastic season, and one of number 9's most daring. The thing is, this one, it feels the least normal, whether that's with its setting, its presentation, its content. It's so weird and just very out there and experimental. You've got settings such as a football changing room, a police car, you have a story presented via webcams, and you also have one told in like an Advent 24-day vignette style. You even have a sequel to one of Pemberton and Shearsmith's older shows, Psychoville. So it's so daring and out there, this series. Now, it doesn't quite hit the ball 100% of the time, but this is why I love number 9, because of how different it can be. It's so out there, and I love how much variety there is in this series. And yeah, so let's review the series. Spoilers as well. I mean, that's kind of a given with number 9. But yeah, let's get into it. The series kicks off with the referee's a wanker. Oh man, that pun is so... My joke is so corny, but it's great. And I get to swear as well, because it's in context. So yeah, take that. I'm not bleeping that out. Anyway, this episode, it's about football. It's about match fixings, changing room drama. And I should clarify that I'm not a football fan. I couldn't care less about it if I tried. So this episode really isn't for me, but it's not a bad episode. So it focuses on this episode a referee who is on their last game before retirement, played by David Morrison's meal deals himself, David Morrissey, who I think does give a fantastic performance in this episode. He's the real highlight. He gives such a gravitas and authority in the situation. But the other three referees that he's with, Pemberton, Shearsmith, and guest star Ralph Little, they're also great in this episode as well in terms of their performances. They're really good. They're refereeing a game between Man United and Rovers, and there's also a personal stake in it for David Morris's character Martin, because he's actually in a relationship with one of the players, the captain, Calvin Cook. And I thought that was quite interesting, in the sense that it's depicting an LGBTQ plus, romance in a sports context. And because sports is such a, masculine thing, that you don't have many publicly out, anyway, LGBT members in sport. I thought that was quite interesting and unique to explore. And there's all this stuff with match fixing and betting syndicates getting involved, and this very heightened drama surrounding football, and how it's almost like a conspiracy to some people, and how seriously people can take it, and the extremes that they go. And I thought that was quite interesting. I also thought the episode had some quite good humour as well. But the thing is with me, I'm not a football fan, and I never will be, to be honest. It's just, I don't care about football. I'm sorry, I just don't. But a lot of the humour and the football heavy dialogue, and the kind of what's at stake, Man United will get promoted to the Premiership, and Rovers will not get relegated, and also it turns out that Martin is also a Manchester City fan as well, so he manages to match fix the game so Manchester City get, his favourite team, get promoted. And I understand it. And that's like the twist as well, that last thing about him being a City fan instead. That's the twist. And I understand it, but because I don't care about football, I just don't care. It doesn't ring true. I actually watched this again with subtitles on, just in case I missed all this football-heavy dialogue. And there were a few kind of cool references. There was a reference to the Qatar World Cup, which I thought was quite interesting, actually. But I will not care about football, so I just don't care about the episode's stakes, and I just don't care about it. And it's not anything the episode does wrong. I don't want my lower opinion of this episode to deter Stephen Rees from doing, more out there stuff that maybe I'm not, as fussed on. Number 9 should do what it wants to do, but it's not going to be for everyone every single time. And this is just one of those examples where it's just not for me. So I'll give this episode a 7 out of 10. But I would be interested in the more football-based stories. It would be interesting. I just think, for me, it was quite alienating. Episode 2, Death Be Not Proud, which is just pure fan service for anyone who watched Shearsmith and Pemberton's previous show, Psychoville. And it's just a one-off return to that show. And I should clarify as well that I have not seen Psychoville yet. Once I'm done with the number 9 revisiting and stuff, I will get on Psychoville, don't you worry. But yeah, even as somebody who was not a fan of Psychoville, who just hasn't seen it, this episode still works as a great story. So the plot for this one is that a couple, Sam and Betty, one of them played by Jenna Coleman actually, they move into a flat that supposedly had a murder take place years ago, and once they're there, there's these strange supernatural activities going on, could be ghosts, and they sort of make this known, and that is when Steve's character, David Sarbutz, comes in and explains to the story of his mother and whatnot, and his life after she died to Jenna Coleman's character. He explains all of that and how he coped, how he got with this woman called Emily that he liked, and they had a kid, and how it kind of all fell apart. It's kind of like from his perspective of him telling these events. Now, I need to clarify again that I have not seen Psychoville, but the episode does. You can understand David and Maureen, Stephen Rees's characters. You completely understand the gist of them. They're a very weird mother and son duo who have an obsession over serial killers. But what this episode does is that it expands the story of Psychoville. It tells a new story that expands on, what it does. And it tells a story of how Maureen passed away and how David copes with that. And therefore it works really well. It's not kind of tied to the past as much, although there are references to Psychoville. There's one of Reese's other characters, Mr. Jelly, makes a cameo. He's like a party clown who's a bit crude, and his delivery of the lines had me in stitches. Yeah, for me, this is probably the funniest episode of this season, but it's just, it had me in stitches. it's so weird and out there, but it had been stitched. I think the reason I like it, even with having not seen Psychoville, is that it's a very similar tone to the League of Gentlemen. It's these sketch characters, that Stephen Reese play multiple characters in the show, and it's these sketch characters that they play, and it's the really weird dynamics and these idiosyncratic characters that they play that it's a similar tone to that, and I love League of Gentlemen. It's so weird, but I find it hilarious, and it's that. I really enjoy it. But the episode still works as a great story with really emotional, powerful scenes, like the part where Maureen does pass away. It's really touching, and the way that we see David wanting to try and make himself a better person and try and improve his life, but then obviously still gets haunted by his mother, and she kind of holds him back. You do kind of feel sorry for him, and at the end, God, it's mental. Like Maureen possesses Jenna Coleman's character, who kills David and also kills her boyfriend. And then as ghosts, David and Maureen do their little Superman dance, which is an iconic scene from the show that I think we've all seen. It is hilarious, but it's still really strong. I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. It's just, I think it's really strong. Even if you've not seen Psychoville, it's still really strong. I think the reason I wouldn't give it a 10, and this sounds a bit harsh, admittedly, but I don't think it's quite as deep and thought-provoking as some of the other episodes, like 12 Days of Christine or Riddle of the Sphinx. It doesn't quite transcend that. It's not quite as transcendent as those episodes, but it is so entertaining, this one. Episode 3 now, Love's Great Adventure, which is one of the most grounded and realistic episodes that this show has ever given us, and I love it for that, to be honest. The plot of this one is very, very simple. It's about a working class family in the north of England during the month of December trying to get by, and the main conflict of the episode comes with the son of the family, Patrick, who's kind of off the rails. He's got money problems with gangs and like drug gangs and whatnot, and he's left his son to be taken care of by his parents, one of them played by Pemberton, and it is very kitchen sink, slice of life sort of stuff. It really goes for realism, and this episode it kind of gets overlooked, but I think it's just great. Again, it's what I love about this season in particular, of pushing the boat out and doing very unique things. It's very unique for number 9 episode 2. Well, not have a big twist at the end and not be kind of larger than life. This is very down to earth. Whether that's through the cinematography, which just feels like it's so minimalist. It feels just like you're a bystander watching these people unfold. You are the cameraman just in the house watching. It's that authentic, or how true to life the performances are. It's very it's very real. Another thing that does this episode a great favour is the narrative presentation. It's told in 24 different vignettes via opening an advent calendar each day, which I have used in one of my Christmas specials that I did. I used that kind of novelty of showing a few minutes of action behind each day of the door of the advent calendar. But what I think it does very well here is that you only see a few minutes at a time. So it's just this little, ironically, a little window into the action. And you don't always get the context of it. It's just, you're just presented with it. You're just presented with what happens, and there's no sort of flashiness to it. It's just, this is just a few minutes of what happened today. It could have been any other day, but it's just that kind of randomness that just, this is what happens, and it's just, it's really effective. The performances, as I say, are really strong. They are just very true to life, especially that of Trevor, played by Pemberton, and Julia, who are they are the grandparents, played by Pemberton, and also Debbie Rush. They are fantastic, and they're just sort of really trying to keep the family afloat, and you can see it's a struggle, but they do love them all, even though they have their quabbles and their, issues. They all stick together, and it's just really, really sweet and really wholesome, and it's just really well done, and it puts you in a good mood, especially for the festive period. It's really great. Another thing I forgot to mention about with the performances, the younger members of the cast are really, really good. Even the little lad, like, there's some really nice subtleties with him, and for such a young actor, I think he did a really good job. And actually, I think there are some scenes that, when it's from his perspective, they really do hit hard. There's some really hard-hitting powerful scenes in this episode. Now, this episode doesn't have a big, gargantuan twist at the very end of the episode that will shock you. It has a few sort of mini twists. Like, one thing about the Advent Calendar thing is that they miss door number 9 because, number 9, and they only realise it later near the end of the episode, and that's when they open it, and that's when they show you what happened on day 9, and it's a very key bit of information as it sort of changed the story from that point onwards, from like day 10 onwards. And also there's like a mini twist of what happened with the gang that Patrick got caught up in. But the episode doesn't end on this kind of climactic note. It ends on a more, softer note. And on a first viewing, I can understand why people would have been a bit a bit confused, a little bit sort of not sure what to think. But rewatching it and knowing how the story plays out and knowing the intention of the story, to have some big climactic twist, I don't know, the gang comes in, guns are blazing, I don't know, something like that, something really weird like that, would have been very narratively and tonally really inappropriate. And I love the fact that it just goes for something simple, because it's still different and unique and trying something new, and it works so well. It comes together as such a lovely little package, and I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. Definitely give it a revisit if you were a bit kind of confused the first time around of like the no twist and whatnot. Give it a rewatch, because it's such a great one to watch, especially around the festive period. Episode 4, Misdirection, which I'm going to say is my favourite of this season. I was umming and ahhing actually about, there's another episode that we're going to talk about later, which in the moment after rewatching it, I felt that's my favourite. But thinking about it more, this is the crowning achievement of this season, because it does that thing I was talking about with Death Be Not Proud, about kind of transcending that barrier of quality to become something more, to become a 10 out of 10. Because this episode, yes, it's well acted, written, directed, and scored. It's competently made, but it transcends that. It means something more than that, and that's why people love this one. So the episode is about magicians and the world of magic that Reese Shearsmith in real life is quite fascinated with, like how Pemberton is with crosswords and whatnot. And it's incorporated here. So Reese plays a magician, Neville Griffin, who is very successful, but it's established at the beginning that he murdered another magician played by Pemberton to get his secrets, like the floating chair trick. It's a chair-raising experience, so like great stuff. And he's successful. Then he gets confronted by a young lad, Gabriel, played by Fionn Whitehead, who wants to interview him. And then from there, there's a lot of misdirection from all the characters, from those two in particular. There's a lot of misdirection, a lot of back and forth, and Gabriel is there to get some revenge, but in a very sneaky way. So the performances in this episode are top-notch. Shearsmith is great, really kind of mysterious and just kind of really creepy and enigmatic, and he plays off Fionn Whitehead very well. They're very good back and forth, and Fionn Whitehead's very, very strong and quite clever. Pemberton, although we don't get much of him, he's very fun, and the costume's pretty funny as well. In fact, that's the thing about the episode. Despite being set in this dingy warehouse, it's visually really appealing. The lighting, the contrast of lighting from the opening to the rest of the story, very effective. The sense of colour and life that is in this such dingy setting, I think is conveyed very well without being sort of over the top and needlessly flashy. But the other aspects of the direction, like the cinematography is so well done. It's so well shot and framed certain things which, aid in the big twist towards the episode. But you also get really awe-inspiring moments with like the chair, the floating chair trick at the beginning, and also when Steve's character gets killed, it's quite gnarly and nasty. But also just little details as well, and it's kind of creepy and atmospheric and just creates a great atmosphere. Also, music by Christian Henson. I think this series is probably the best scored in terms of number 9, but this has incredible music. The bit at the end, the final scene, that music is just, the violin score is just excellent. It is fantastic. You've got plenty of really interesting kind of tidbits about the magic world and how it works and stuff like the copyright thing. What is it? It's the word that it's embedded in like copyrighted material to, things like little details like that are just really interesting. And overall, there's just a really playful atmosphere, but quite darkly playful, which number 9 excels at anyway. But the whole thing of trying to deceive the other person, and it gets to a very gnarly extent. But there is a playfulness because it's about the world of magic. There is a playfulness to it in a way, and it makes it really entertaining to watch. In a way, it reminds me of a bit of Christopher Nolan's The Prestige because of how kind of playful it is with the whole War of Magic. And if you've not seen the film, I'd highly recommend it. But I think the reason overall why I love it so much, and the reason it's elevated from a great episode to a top tier episode of number 9, is how meta it feels. Steve and Reese kind of feel like magicians themselves. They are, pulling tricks of the audience, twisting, traditional narratives and presentations with, the televised medium. And in a similar way to when you watch a magic trick that seems unbelievable, like the floating chair trick here, it's like, how do you do it? You've got to think to yourself, I always think to myself, how does Steve and Reese create these complex, thought-provoking, fascinating, creepy stories with barely any characters, with such small locations, and in half an hour's runtime? How do they do it? It's just... I love how this episode really reflects that. The fact that it's around the world of magic, I think, helps that, because, as I said, it's a very playful episode in a way. And number 9 is famously very darkly comic. It's a dark comedy. So it just reflects the tone of number 9 even more, and so many little details that add up. And when you realise what's happened at the end, initially, I probably needed a bit kind of time to think over it, but it's so satisfying when you find out properly what's happened and how it's happened, because you can track it so cleverly, and every little detail, every move just made an impact, and it's just phenomenal. Another great scene I want to talk about, actually, I think this kind of proves the point, and it's one of my favourite scenes of all of number 9. It's the part where Neville shows Gabriel the card trick twice, once with just kind of the basic level of performance, and then later adding a kind of narrative and then a performative angle to it to show the difference that the whole performative angle and adding a story, adding a narrative to a magic trick, how it elevates it, like an elevating chair. See, it's all jokey, I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, but that, again, it's that kind of... just how important narrative kind of is to magic, and it's clear that Reese has a passion for this kind of stuff. But I'm pretty rambling on at this point. Look, this episode is just a masterpiece, and I would hold it up there in my top 10 of number 9. It's up there with the likes of Riddle of the Sphinx and whatnot. It's up there. I'd give it a 10 out of 10. Episode 5, Thinking Out Loud, which at one point I would have probably said was my favourite from the season, and looking back, it's really not. It's a very good one, but it's not without its faults. It's got some very glaring issues, and it's not my favourite, but it is still very interesting as an episode. So the way that this episode's told is really weird and odd, but really interesting. It's told via webcams, a bit of a precursor to COVID there, but it's these various different characters are very different, all filming them on webcams. It's just them talking to the camera. So you start off the episode with a character called Bill, who is kind of the most disconnected from the other characters, and we'll get to that in a second, but it's a dating website, and he's talking about how he lost his wife and he wants to get back and for a fresh start. And it kind of reminds me of one of those... It's one of the League of Gentlemen sketches. It was a dating site thing. It was like, are you very kind? Kind? Not at all kind to animals. It reminded me a bit of that, and I really love that sketch, but it was pretty cool. Then we cut to the kind of main character of this, Nadia, who is telling a story of this drunken night out that she had, and it's quite waffly and rambling, kind of conversational. But even here, you can kind of... There's the things that she says you can link to with what Bill has just said in his little dating video thing, and these kind of connective tissues are overlapping, especially when you rewatch the episode and you understand them. Then you get Steve, who playing an American criminal who's locked up in Louisiana, who had committed murder, killed his mum and skinned them. And look, I think Steve Pemberton is a fantastic performer, an underrated performer at that. But this has got to be Steve's weakest performance. Like, that Louisiana accent is really poor, and it's not a great turn for Steve, unfortunately. Although probably one of the only weak points in his entire number 9 career. Then you have a social media influencer, Angel, who is absolutely spot on. Like, the way they edit it with the constant jump cuts, it is bang on to how social media influencers and YouTubers edit their videos, and it is, as a content creator like that, it was just great to see. And it doesn't feel like a bunch of old farts who don't know how the young people of today work. It does not feel out of touch at all. It does not feel like that Steve Buscemi meme. How do you do, fellow kids? It is completely accurate, and it's done so well. Then you have Reese's character, Aidan, recording videos of himself, recounting on his life and different memories, which it turns out is for his as of yet unborn daughter, because he has a terminal illness that, you know, he might not be able to meet his daughter. And my God, along with Diddle Little Dumpling and Wise Owl, this is one of Reese's best performances. It is beautiful. His performance is absolutely beautiful. And speaking of beautiful, we have our final character, Diana, who sings Amazing Grace, and she's a character that Reese has found to sing at their funeral. And it's just like, I mean, that song is phenomenal, and the way that she performs it is phenomenal. But you, as I've said, you see these connective tissues with these seemingly really unrelated plot lines, and it's really weird, but when you pick up on these things on rewatch, it's kind of cool. And there's certain details, like certain characters' names being anagrams of each other. And then it was revealed, the twist of the episode is that Nadia has split personality disorder because of Bill and the abuse. It was to do with childhood and how he treated his wife, and that kind of trauma led to this disorder that she has. Now, I'm no expert in this, but I would say that it's handled tastefully. I don't think it's handled distastefully. But as I say, take what I say with a pinch of salt because I'm no expert. However, I think the twist is really clumsily delivered, more in the way that it's so over-explained and it's just this exposition dump at the end. You know, these things like the anagrams and what these different personalities mean to Nadia, we can figure that out with visuals or maybe a flashback or just showing the names and how they are anagrams of each other. But it's spelling it out, and it's a really clumsy revelation at the end, and it does end the episode on a bit of a damp squib. But overall, I think it's a really creative, interesting episode, so I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. And now we've got the finale, the Stakeout, which is the episode that I was talking about earlier, that in the moment after I'd rewatched it, I was thinking, yeah, this is my favourite of the season. I still prefer Misdirection now, but this episode is fantastic. So this episode is very minimalist. It's set in a police car and at a graveyard, and there's a stakeout at this graveyard over the course of 3 days, and it is just the moments in between all of the action with Pemberton and Shearsmith's two police officer characters, just and what they do to pass the time. It's basically a double hander between those two, and it's just kind of the friendly banter that they get into, which can often lead to something a bit more disturbing and unleash and, you know, release some kind of emotional trauma, in particular with Steve's character, because he has recently lost one of his police partners, and, you know, it's kind of him coping with that. I think the setting of the police car is really creative. It allows for some more dynamic action with the filmmaking and whatnot when they're driving around, but it also elevates the kind of claustrophobic feeling. It's a unique setting, and I really like it. Stephen Reese, again, it's another double act like in Bernie Clifton, where it's just those two predominantly, and they bounce off each other very well. Like the fortunately, unfortunately game that they play is great. And then towards the end of the story, it becomes a vampire story. You know, kind of tapping into that sort of supernatural element, it's a unique finale for number 9, because obviously the finales do tend to go for the more horror-based one, but this is more... It feels unique prior to this point anyway. It feels very unique, and it's not the traditional setting for the horror, and it goes for the more supernatural angle fully with the whole vampires thing, which is very unique, and it's more kind of psychological than kind of over the top gory, although the gore that we get is very effective, and there's some really great hints throughout the episode sprinkled in. A great one is when Reese gets Steve a coffee, and it's about I'm just watching out for your blood pressure. A great little hint there. Even the name, the Stakeout, steak, vampires. There's some great hints just throughout the episode, and it's more of a drama. It's more of a drama between these two characters, and that's the anchor of the story, and that's why it holds up so well. Shout out to the music yet again. I mean, another greatly scored episode. The violins, but also those synths are really effective, and the ending of the story, man, it's a really great note to end on. So again, it gets a 10 out of 10, this one. A lighter 10, not as strong as Misdirection, but it's still phenomenal. And that's the end of this video, and also potentially the end of my number 9 retrospective. We'll see how Series 6 goes. But yeah, here's my ranking. As you can see, Misdirection and the Stakeout. It's a toss-up between those two, but the more I think about it, I think the Stakeout is very much worthy of the top spot. Love's Great Adventure, Definitely Not Proud. They're also very strong, and the Referee's a Wanker and Thinking Out Loud are weaker, but I still think they're pretty good. Like, I think they are pretty good. Yeah, overall, a really strong, experimental and daring season. That's what I take away most from this series. But yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed all the retrospectives, and I will see you with another video. Goodbye.